Today, inshallah ta'ala, we will begin a series of lectures, maybe two, maybe three. We'll see how we're able to do in terms of time, about a topic that all of us have heard about, and the popular culture has introduced it to us from a young age, and there are references in our tradition about this reality. It is the topic of the evil eye, in Arabic called al-ayn, in Urdu and in Bangla called a nazar or a najar. So the notion of nazar or ayn, the notion in English of the evil eye. What is its reality? Does it exist? How does it exist? What should we do to prepare ourselves, to protect ourselves against it? How do we know if we have it, if it does exist? And what is the mechanism to get rid of it if we have it? All of these, inshallah ta'ala, will be a part of our discussion. And of course, this is a very long topic, so we might take, a few. We'll see how many. We'll see how quickly we can go through this reality. So I'm going to begin with a historical introduction, and then we move on to the references in the Quran, and then the references in the Hadith, and then interpretation of the scholars. So I want to give a very comprehensive, a very academic talk about this reality, because as with many talks, there really is a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of culture mixed with mythology, mixed with Quran and Sunnah. And we have to be brave enough to separate the fact from the fiction, right? And as with all lectures, I will try my best to give you the diversity of thought. When I introduce you to the diversity of thought, this does not mean I endorse everything I say. You have to, again, we have to already preempt, because every topic that is given, people are so sensitive in this regard. My dear brothers in Islam, this topic has been contested within our ummah by scholars. I'm not censoring what the scholars have said. I want you to know what they said. So by telling you this guy said this guy said that, it's not an endorsement. You can simply Google without me, but I'll facilitate and teach you. And yes, I will also conclude with my opinion as well. But when I mention other opinions, it's not an endorsement. It is simply the reality we should be aware. And especially when this topic becomes even more problematic, in the sense that so many people assume that any failure they have is due to nazar or ayn. They can't pass their exam, they'll blame ayn rather than not studying, right? The food came out too salty, this is ayn. Their business failed, it is ayn. And honestly, it becomes problematic when you start blaming every failure, right? Even if the concept is real, even if it is real, if you start blaming everything on it, this is a problem, which is actually a bigger problem than reinterpreting al-ayn, to be honest, right? So all of these issues have to be discussed. In order to do so, I ask all of you to leave your emotions to the side and start listening to what the Quran and Sunnah, what our scholars have said, and understand this reality. And we hope, inshaAllah ta'ala, through these series of lectures, inshaAllah ta'ala, we can separate truth from what we're not certain, could be, could not be, which is middle, from what is clearly mythology. Because there's always a spectrum. This is ilm al-ghayb. It's like the reality of jinn. There are certain things we know, for sure. There are certain things we know, without a doubt, are also not true. And there's a lot that we're not sure about. We should be brave enough to acknowledge this diversity and then proceed with that humility. So with all of this, our talk today, depending on how long we go, I'm going to start off talking about the concept of evil eye pre-Islam, because yes, it exists pre-Islam. And it is important that we mention this in some detail, because the accusation that some people have is that this notion is actually not Islamic, it is pre-Islamic. And the Islamic tradition has adopted and taken it. There's an accusation that people make. So we need to separate and explain the reality of this. So we begin by the history. And again, in a nutshell, because actually many dissertations have been written about this, you can read quite a lot about these pre-modern cultures or pre-Islamic cultures. One indisputable fact: nazar, the evil eye, al-ayn, was a concept that the vast majority of pre-Islamic societies believed in. This is a fact. There's no two opinions about this. You can go back to the earliest recorded history, and you will find in every single major society the notion of the eyes looking at something with jealousy, causing that something to be harmed, which is what the evil eye is. In essence, one definition is the evil eye is the look or the gaze that is coming from an evil heart. The gaze that is coming from a heart of jealousy, a heart that is burning with rage. How come that guy has it? How come that lady has it? And that gaze affects the end user. This is called the evil eye. So, pre-Islam, this notion is almost universal. It exists in almost all societies. And we have, for example, in the most ancient Sumerian and Akkadian incantations in 2500 BC. That is the earliest recorded history. Sumerian history is the earliest inscriptions we have. There's nothing before that that is written. We don't have recorded history before then at all. Way before the Greeks, way before the Romans, you had the Sumerians, the first civilization in Iraq that recorded its history. Those they're not even hieroglyphics, those carvings, they explicitly mention incantations, du'as, that are supposed to protect the person that says them from the evil eye. The term evil eye is found literally in the Sumerian original. The evil eye, the term evil eye, where do we get it from? Because the Quran and Sunnah doesn't have evil eye. It has a nazar or al-ain, right? Where does the term evil eye come from? It is the English translation of a concept that predates Islam. And so when Islamic culture came with ayn and nazar, when it was translated to English, the concept was already known, and it's called the evil eye. So the Sumerians had du'as. We still have the tablets. There's articles written. I looked up one quickly to make sure that it's actually there. I looked up the original, I can't read Sumerian, don't worry. But just to make sure that I'm telling you the truth, that yes, there is an actual preserved tablet from ancient Sumeria that is meant to be read as a prayer, incantation, to protect people from the evil eye. And the same goes in other cultures as well. The Ugaritic culture, which is after the Sumerians. Pharaonic Egypt, the pharaohs of Egypt, the hieroglyphics, the pyramids. There are hieroglyphic references to rituals to ward off against the evil eye. We now are able to read hieroglyphics, as you know, from the discovery, of the stone, the Rosetta Stone, as you should be aware. So we can read hieroglyphics. And on those hieroglyphics, there are multiple rituals that are done to appease the gods to protect you from the evil eye. And in fact, one of the things that the ancient Egyptians did was that they invented a protective symbol, a talisman. This also existed in the Sumerians as well, but the Egyptians invented a protective symbol. And that symbol was called the Eye of Horus, H-R-U-O-S. And Horus is one of the Egyptian gods. And the Eye of Horus, and all of you have seen this eye in Egyptian images and hieroglyphs. You just don't know it's the Eye of Horus. There's an eye that is shaped like this, and there's you exactly know what I'm talking about, right? Every one of you has seen it because it's very common. It's every Egyptian, papyri that is sold, every Egyptian image that is sold, it has that eye over there, right? And of course, from that eye, eventually we're going to get to the Turkish turquoise eye, the talisman, right? It goes back to the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus was meant to act as a protection against the what? The evil eye. That's why it's that eye. The eye of the God is looking, so it's going to avert the eye that is harmful, right? So we clearly have something that goes back 3,000 years to ancient Egypt that is, again, mainstream. But see, here's the interesting thing. It's not just Eastern cultures. Western cultures, pre-Islam, the Greeks and the Romans, they also believed in this concept. It's very well documented. In fact, in the most iconic Greek philosophers, in Socrates and Plato, you actually have references to the evil eye in Plato. And you have Plato and Socrates saying to Plato, of course you should know that Socrates did not write any books. Plato is recording from Socrates. So Plato says, my Shaykh Socrates, or he didn't say Shaykh, but Plato says Socrates said that, and I quote from Plato's writings, "Nay, my good friend, let us not boast, lest some evil eye put to flight the word I'm about to speak. This is exactly the concept of evil eye. And Socrates is telling Plato, I don't want to boast about this. What I'm going to tell you, this new fact, this new idea, I want to be careful. Just in case the evil eye will then cause me to not able to tell you. I can't boast, I have to be humble. So literally the notion of bragging or boasting is going to attract the attention, and that's going to cause me to not be successful in what I'm about to do. We get it straight here from Socrates and Plato as well. So it's something that is found in pre-Islamic literature, and this is the Greeks. And then the Romans are no different. We have Roman philosophers as well. So we have, Jazakallah khair, we have Roman philosophers. Pliny the Elder was almost contemporaneous of Jesus Christ, a little bit after Jesus, so maybe in the 70s, 70 CE, so 2,000 years ago. Pliny the Elder, he writes, there are people who also bewitch with a glance and who kill those who they stare at for a long period of time. If a person stares with that malice, people can kill them. And this is a pagan Roman philosopher. He's not even a Christian. This is a pagan Roman philosopher. And another philosopher of that time frame, Plutarch, died 120. Plutarch, he writes that very handsome persons, when others look upon them, often suffer damage by envy and the evil eye. This is Plutarch, one of the famous philosophers, dies 120 CE, so again, 2,000 years ago. Says, beautiful, handsome people, it's very common that the evil eye befalls them when people stare at them. And Plutarch actually, because he's a philosopher and a physicist and a chemist, you know how they were back in the day, he actually has an idea that from the eyes emit some supernatural rays. He believes that the eye of the person doing the ayn, the evil eye, there's some type of rays that come and mystically or physically or supernaturally harm that person. Okay, so he writes here that those rays that come, they can potentially cause harm to other people. So we talked about pagan cultures pre-Islam. Abrahamic cultures pre-Islam also believed in the evil eye. Judaism and Christianity. They both have the notion of the evil eye. In Judaism, there is a concept known as Ayn Harra. Ayn Harra. Ayn. Ayn. Literally, it's called Ayn. Because again, Hebrew is a Semitic language, as you know. And if you start studying Hebrew, you literally can start doing it very easy because so much of it is basically Semitic. So you understand it very easily. Ayn Harra literally means the evil eye. And in Jewish Talmudic literature, there is a lot of reference to the evil eye. And the notion is that, very similar to ours, that it is possible for a person full of envy and jealousy to harm somebody because of Ayn Harra. And the same is found in the Christian Gospels as well. In Mark chapter 7, verse 22, that Jesus allegedly warned his followers against the dangers of the evil eye. And a long list in that mention is the evil eye. Now, Christian theologians, by and large, did not take it central to their theology as much as others did, but it is found, and you do find references in some early Christian fathers, the church fathers, but by and large, Christianity has lost its original theology, it's lost its sharia, as you know, and it has also lost many of these things as well, but still, the notion is found here and there within Christianity. Now, before we now get to the Quran, what do we do with the fact that the notion of the evil eye clearly, undoubtedly, is found in so many civilizations before the coming of the Quran? What do you do with this fact? Because this fact can potentially be used in a challenging manner. The response is very simple, and that is, there are two ways to look at it: the way of the believer and the way of the non-believer. The way of the non-believer, the way of the skeptic, the way of the one who doesn't believe in Allah, doesn't believe in revelation, is to say, this is mythology, and all cultures believe that mythology, and Islam is no different. And the same notion that for example, the great flood of Nuh alayhi salam, Okay, another undeniable fact, every single civilization in the globe without exception has a myth of a great flood that engulfed mankind. There is no civilization that does not have such a myth, the story of the great flood. When I say no, I mean we don't know of a single. Native Americans, the Aborigines, who are the most cut off of all human ethnicities. Aborigines have cut off from the rest of civilization 60,000 years ago. For 60,000 years, they had no contact with the rest of the world. They are the most isolated until, white explorers, Cook and Swift ever discovered them in 50, when they finally discovered Australia, and this entire civilization that had literally been cut off from the rest of mankind for 65,000 years. And guess what? In the Aborigines, we have the Great Flood myth as well. So the skeptic comes and says, okay, so the Bible and the Babylonian civilization and the Akkadian civilization and the Sumerian civilization and the Pharaonic civilization and this is a myth, all of it is the myth. And that's from their perspective. From us as the believer perspective, we literally flip the script 180. And I don't find this to be at all illogical. It is absolutely 100% rational. And that is the reason why even the Aborigines have a great flood myth is because a great flood actually happened. And because it happened, so then that legend survived in all civilizations. And yes, it's not exactly the same. So without a doubt, the Quranic version, we would believe, is the authentic one. And all the other versions have just, been corrupted with memory over time. So the same fact, you can look at it in two different ways. And I don't see any problem in coming to this and saying with the same thing with the evil eye, that the reason why all societies affirmed the evil eye is because at its core, people have experiences that this is real. At its core, they have figured out that something is going on, and they have realized that this is coming from the jealousy and cause and effect. When a jealous person is staring and mumbles something, and this person is burning with jealousy, next thing you know, something happens. In all civilizations, they've kind of put 1 + 1 together. And they said, hey, something's not adding up here. Let's call it something. Let's call it the evil eye. By the way, it's not called the evil eye in every civilization. But interestingly enough, the ancient Sumerians did call it the evil eye. That's why we have the term to this day, right? And the Jewish people call it al-ayn. Ayn, we call it an ayn. And of course, that's, So from our perspective, it doesn't represent a very big problem, because you can flip the script and say the reason why all civilizations mention it is because it's true. And I would also add here another fact. I mentioned this in my other lecture I gave about the reality of the jinn. Interestingly enough, we're not going to go to the jinn today, don't worry. Interestingly enough, every civilization also believes in spirits, in the jinn world. Every civilization. Now, once again, if you're a pseudo-scientific skeptic, you say, oh, this is all child's play. Everybody has this mythology. Flip the script. Why does every single civilization on earth believe in entities that are beyond our physical vision? Why? They have called them different names, fairies and demons and ghouls and ghosts. Call them what you will. The notion of a non-physical being that interacts with our world, appears in terrifying forms, is not nice to us, is evil. That notion is 100% universal around the globe. In fact, even in this world of America, when people have denied God, there are many people who deny God, but they don't deny the supernatural. They don't deny belief in other entities. Why? Because they've experienced it. I have met people in the course of my interaction in academia and whatnot. I have met so many people. They don't believe in a higher power. They believe in a lower power. Can you believe? Literally. Because they've experienced things. And when you've experienced things, or their families have experienced things, or their friends have experienced things, and so they say there must be a world out there. There must be some entities out there. Call them what you will. We call them jinn. They call them other things. So my point is that for the believer, the fact that the notion of the evil eye is universal should not at all be problematic. We can quite literally flip the script and say it is universal because it is real. Okay, now this is the history. Let's now move on to the evidences from the Quran and Sunnah. The Quran has at least a dozen verses that some ulama have attempted to prove mention the evil eye. It is my assessment and the assessment of many scholars, take it or leave it, that the Quran is not explicit about the evil eye, but it is implicit. Take it or leave it, and I'll quote you the verses. I went over all 12 of them today in quite detail, and I just decided 5 or 6 do not even make any cut, because they talk about hasad, have nothing to do with the evil eye. Hasad is hasad. Of course it exists. And a lot of ulama took verses about hasad. أَمْ يَحْسُدُونَ النَّاسَ عَلَى مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Like, what has that got to do with the evil eye? And they said this is a reference. No, there's no reference at all. So I chose 4 or 5 verses that I believe are at least a bit more indirect, but, and you can agree or disagree, it's fine. The Quran does not explicitly mention the concept of evil eye. And this is what has allowed some Muslim philosophers and thinkers to say this is not an Islamic concept, because it's not found explicitly in the Quran. I'm just saying some people, again, don't misquote me. We're going to get to my own opinion in a while, inshallah. I have to be so careful. There are whole trigger-happy people just waiting to release 15 refutations immediately. Allahul Musta'an. It is what it is. Inshallah, Allah is the ultimate judge in the next life, and in this world, history judges not. A person is never judged in his own lifetime. It's when they're gone, then people look at them and decide. In this world, people, it's irrelevant what people say. We leave legacies, and Allah Azza wa Jal decides in the akhirah, and people decide after a person leaves this world. And I hope Allah Azza wa Jal accepts from us. So, what are the verses in the Quran that discuss the evil eye? In my opinion, the most explicit verse is Surah Qalam, verse 51. Surah Qalam, verse 51. And again, I say the most explicit, but none of them are actually explicit. وَإِنْ يَكَادُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الذِّكْرَ وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّهُ لَمَجْنُونَ. The kuffar would love, they're trying their best to, the Arabic is لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ. This is the only time in the whole Quran this phrase occurs. لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ. The only time in the whole Quran this word occurs with their eyes. And zalaqa means to demolish, means to cut down. So it is possible the kuffar are trying, they're eager to destroy you with their own eyes when they hear you recite the Quran and they say that you are majnoon. So they're trying to destroy you, they're trying to demolish you by staring at you. This is implicit, but is it explicit? Because you can look at somebody wanting to destroy them in anger, and I'm sure we've all done this in our lifetime when somebody cuts you crossing the lane, right? You give them that stare. It's a stare, it's an anger. It's not the evil eye. لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ. So this is a reference. Now, At-Tabari and others, they mention this is a reference to the evil eye. Great, excellent tafsir, but it is a tafsir of the ayah, it is not the ayah. I'm just being factual here. It is an extrapolation, and if you go look at the other scholars, like for example Mu'tazila, they don't agree with Al-Ain. The non-Sunni scholars, many of them don't agree. The Mu'tazila, go read their tafsirs. They'll take it at face value. That the kuffar are staring with you in anger. They wish you could just be destroyed. And what they have said fits the language of the Quran. Right? So this is one verse. Another verse, Surah Kahf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the two people that are arguing. وَلَوْلَا إِذْ دَخَلْتَ جَنَّتَكَ قُلْتَ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ إِن تَرَانِي أَنَا أَقَلَّ مِنكَ مَالًا وَوَلَدًا. Why don't you say مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ when you enter your Jannah? Question, is this explicit about the evil eye? Not at all. It's quite literally just saying you should be thankful to Allah when you enter your garden. So this is a reference, and many mufassirin say this is to protect you from the evil eye. And I say, great tafsir, jazakallah khair, but it is a tafsir, it is not the ayah. And it is jaiz to have a tafsir that is extrapolating, it's permissible. But let's be fair and allow those who say, but this isn't explicit, to say, you're right, it's not explicit. Right? So this is one of the verses that وَلَوْلَا إِذْ دَخَلْتَ جَنَّتَكَ قُلْتَ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. This is the second verse. The third verse we're going to do, Surah Yusuf, verse 67. Surah Yusuf, verse 67. وَقَالَ يَا بَنِيَّ لَا تَدْخُلُوا مِنْ بَابٍ وَاحِدٍ وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Yaqub says to his sons, do not enter from one door, rather enter from multiple doors. And I know that when you do so, it will not protect you anything from the qadr of Allah. And then Allah says in the very next verse, and when they followed their father and they entered in from multiple doors, ما كان يغني عنهم من شيء إلا حاجة في نفس يعقوب قضاها. Allah affirms exactly what Yaqub said. When the brothers entered from all of these doors, it didn't affect anything in Allah's qadr. It was just something in the heart of Yaqub that he wanted fulfilled, and it was fulfilled. At-Tabari says, he informed them and he commanded them to do this because they were a group of young, handsome men. فَخَافَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْعَيْنِ. He was worried for al-ayn if they were to enter from one door and everybody saw them together. Question, Tabari's tafsir, is it explicit or is it implied? Implied. Because go read the Mu'tazili tafsirs, go read the non-Sunni tafsirs, and they will say he was worried that a group of 10, 11 men would be perceived as a physical threat. This wanted to be dispersed. Not al-ayn, but like a gang is coming in. You know, in a strange town, you are ethnically different because they were ethnically different, right? And they are coming in, you know, because again, the world back then, it's a very different world. It's not equal rights. There's no visas, whatnot. You never know what's going to happen. So bring low attention to yourself. Be wise in how you do things. So once again, the verse is quite clear, and many scholars, I'm quoting At-Tabari, there's actually this verse, at least a dozen of our mufassirun interpreted to be al-ayn. You can go read Ibn Atiyah, Ibn al-Jawzi, so many, they said al-ayn, al-ayn, al-ayn. And okay, Jazakallah khair, I honestly appreciate, but I have to be precise. It might be a reference to al-ayn, but it might not be as well. As we said, let's be very clear here, that the Quran doesn't seem to have anything explicit. Jayyid. The last verse we will mention, so I mentioned 5 of them. There are more, but in my opinion, those others are not even vaguely referencing. They're just hasad, references of hasad. The 5th and final reference, that is the most common reference for al-ayn. Which one is it? Who can tell me? Surah Falaq. Surah Falaq. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. Question, is this explicit about al-ayn? وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. Does it mention ayn? Is there not physical evil that can happen from the evil of the one who is jealous? So once again, what did I tell you? It's up to you to accept or not. I'm not forcing anybody to follow any opinion. I'm trying to be very neutral and fair. The Quran does not explicitly reference al-ayn. There are a number of verses that have been interpreted to be al-ayn. Because وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ can be a reference to al-ayn. It can be. And it can also be a reference to a jealous person goes crazy. And a jealous person will do what no other person will do physically to harm you, to say things about you, to lie, to backstab. So when the Quran is saying, وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ, oh Allah, protect me from anybody who's jealous of me. Yeah. It could be physical, it could be al-ayn. So the Quran implicitly has been interpreted to discuss al-ayn by many scholars, but to be fair, there doesn't seem to be an explicit reference to al-ayn. So where do we get the reference from? The references to al-ayn are explicit in the Sunnah, without a doubt. There are more than 10 ahadith about al-ayn, some of them in Bukhari and Muslim, very few, and the rest of them in a number of sunan, quite a lot of them in the tertiary books. So let's divide hadith books into three categories. The category number one is Bukhari and Muslim. Category number two is Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nisa, Ibn Majah, Muwatta, Musnad Imam Ahmad. This is secondary. Category three is beyond this, the Mustadrak and Al-Bayhaqi. So this is like you have hundreds in that category. I'm not even looking at category three, because that is where you find a lot of fabricated, a lot of very weak. In the Sahihain, Bukhari and Muslim, there are references to Al-Ain. In Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Nisa, Ibn Majah, Muslim, Imam Ahmad, there are at least 6 or 7, if not more, references to Al-Ain. So the notion of Al-Ain is very explicit in books of hadith. And let's go over some of them, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll call it an evening and continue next week, inshallah. So let's go over the hadith references. The most explicit one, which is mentioned, various versions are found in Al-Bukhari and Al-Muslim, and some have said this hadith is mutawatir. It is Al-Ainu Haqq. Al-Ainu Haqq. You all understand that much Arabic? Al-Ainu Haqq. This is considered by some scholars to be the highest level of tawatur. Allahu alam, I don't think it is mutawatir, but it is definitely sahih. It is Bukhari, Muslim, and other books, they have Al-Ainu Haqq. In Sahih Muslim, there is the version that if anything could overcome qadar, it would be ayn. In other words, ayn is so powerful. If anything could overcome qadar, if means it doesn't. If anything could destroy qadar, it would be al-ayn. This is in Sahih Muslim. Okay, so we have here in Bukhari and Muslim very explicit, a very explicit hadith. In Sahih Muslim, another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ visited Salama's house, and she saw a little girl. He saw a little girl. Jariya could be a little girl, it could be a slave girl. Jariya has both meanings here. That had a discoloring on her face. في وجهها سفعة. So the Prophet ﷺ said, استرقوا لها فإن بها النظرة. Get somebody to do ruqya on her because she has a nazra. What is a nazra? Almost all the scholars of interpretation and extrapolation of hadith have said a nazra is al-ayn. A nazara, al-ayn. So he saw a girl that had a physical impediment, physical disparity on her skin. And he analyzed it immediately. He said, get somebody to do ruqya because she has a nadra. This is again as explicit as you can get. In another hadith in Sahih Muslim, so again we're still keeping with Sahihain right now, in Sahih Muslim, that the Prophet visited Asma bint Umays. And Asma bint Umays was the wife of Ja'far. And Ja'far had passed away, shaheed. And so he saw the children of Ja'far, and he said, why are the children of my brother so thin, as if they have a disease? Why are they looking like this, feeble? Maybe the word feeble is better than thin. The Arabic word is dhari'a, which means basically they look sickly, they look feeble. Okay, why are the children of my brother, he called Ja'far my brother, why are they looking like this? So do they have a sickness, or are they in need? Do you not have any money? She said, Asma said, no, وَلَكِنْ الْعَيْنُ تُسْرِعُ إِلَيْهِمْ. No, but al-ayn is affecting them. Quickly they're coming. Ayn is coming to us. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, irqihim, do ruqya on them. So he affirmed that this is because of ayn, and he said, do ruqya on them. So this is another explicit hadith, and the same version or a longer version is found in Tirmidhi, that the Prophet visited Asma bint Umays, and she was the one that said that, Ya Rasulullah, the children of Ja'far, you can see that the ayn affects them. Should I get somebody to do ruqya? And he said, yes, get somebody, because if anything will be more stronger than qadar, it would have been al-ayn. So the concept is there that he visited the house of Asma, and the children of Ja'far seemed to be struggling, and he said this is because of ayn. In the Muslim Imam Ahmad, the Prophet, Aisha narrated that the Prophet ﷺ entered my house, and he heard the cry of a child. He heard the cry of a child, and he said, what has happened to this child? that he is crying, you should do ruqya for him against the ayn. In other words, he noticed the type of cry and he said, what has happened to this child? Do ruqya for the ayn. So he literally said, this crying is not because of hunger, it is because of al-ayn. And the longest hadith we'll do, it's a very long hadith, I'm going to summarize it, and this hadith is mentioned in its long form in Musnad Imam Ahmad, and in shorter versions it is found in An-Nisa'i and others, that Umama ibn Sahal ibn Hunayf said that his father Sahal ibn Hunayf narrated that they once went on an expedition towards Mecca, and when they came to a certain valley, Sahal ibn Hunayf took off his qamis, took off his shirt, and he started doing a ghusl. And Sahal ibn Hunayf was a very powerful, strong man with a very good-looking skin. And so Amir ibn Rabi'a started staring at him. And he said, I have never seen a skin that is more handsome than this one. And when he said this, Sahal ibn Hunayf fell down as if he was overcome with a sickness. And he was brought to the Prophet ﷺ. And he was told, Ya Rasulullah, can you look at Sahal ibn Hunayf? Something happened to him and he cannot raise his head up. And he was totally fine. So the Prophet ﷺ said, do you accuse anybody of harming him? هل تتهمون فيه أحد? Do you accuse anybody? So they said, Amir ibn Rabi'a stared at him. Nazar ilayhi Amir ibn Rabi'a. Then he just fell down. So the Prophet ﷺ called Amir, and فَتَغَيَّضَ عَلَيْهِ, he became angry at him. And he said, عَلَى مَا يُقْتَلُ أَحَدُكُمْ صَاحِبَهُ. Why will one of you kill his brother or harm his brother? Why will one of you kill or harm his brother? Why didn't you, when you saw something that you were impressed by, بَرَّكْتَ لَهُ, say barakallahu fi? Why didn't you بَرَّكْتَ لَهُ? Why do you have to be full of like i'jab and wonder? You should have praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he commanded him to do a type of wudu. We're going to come to this next week inshallah. And then after that was done, Suhayd stood up as if nothing had happened to him. So this hadith is in the Musnad Imam Ahmad, and it is absolutely explicit that ayn happened and the Sahabi fell down, and the Prophet got angry at Amir, saying, why did you have to do this? You should have said barakallahu fi and praised him. And then he cured the issue here. And there are other traditions as well. So to summarize, and then we'll start next week inshallah ta'ala, to summarize, the concept of ayn is well documented in pre-Islamic history. The Quran does not explicitly reference it, but there are indirect references that have been interpreted for ayn. And as for the hadith, it is absolutely explicit. There are no two opinions about this. Therefore, generally speaking, those groups that denied hadith, they had the opportunity to deny ayn and nazar, like the Mu'tazila. And those groups that accepted hadith, they by and large accepted al-ayn, and then there's a degree of interpretation between them, and this is where we will going to pause and continue inshallah ta'ala next week. May Allah protect us all from al-ayn, and we'll continue inshallah.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا الرب تعود إلى رضا الرب